All right, welcome everyone. So on today's coaches call, we wanted to go over and present a lot deeper on nutrition, take a bit of a deeper dive into nutrition, what it actually means for athletes within the 24-hour period, something which is going to be athlete focused, but also training centered. So if I share my screen, there we go. Everyone see this okay? Yeah. Perfect. All right. Still good, yeah. I can't actually see any of you, so I'm going to need someone to tell me.
Yes, you're all good.
Perfect. All right. So I wanted to go on a deeper dive into the relative 24-hour nutrition, something that's going to be athlete centered, but very much training focused. So this is a little bit less on the holistic side and much more on the very highly specific for training side of things. The entire goal out of this is going to be to build an idealized 24-hour plan for athletes to be able to optimize performance, right? Again, staying very, very strictly away from this being something that is holistic. This is very, very specific. The reason why I wanted to go into this, I've seen so many benefits of essentially teaching these principles to athletes in my own roster and have seen that be reflected within their performances. So some of the things I want to go over within the content of this is the macronutrients and their functions, a 24-hour routine for morning, roughly midday, and evening training sessions, supplement timing based on training session as well. That will include caffeine, creatine, and electrolytes, and then meet day refeed timing by federation. All of this is going to integrate together so that we understand that peak performance hinges on fuel. A really, really common misconception is that caffeine is energy. Caffeine is not energy. Caffeine is a stimulant. If you ever look on the back of your nutritional labels where it says energy and it says kilocalories or kilojoules, that is where we are getting our energy sources from. Okay, so if you are coming in entirely fasted and you're just having caffeine, that is not fuel, that is not energy. Understanding this helps athletes be better equipped for the platform, for training, and even the everyday decisions that they make surrounding food. Nutrition is, in general, in my opinion, a really, really daunting thing for so many athletes. We deal with a lot of different people with different relationships surrounding food, their body weight, conveniences, be it logging all of their macros, weighing all of their foods, all so many different things. There's so many different ways that you can take this. So nuance is heavily implied. But our entire mission throughout this is to be able to provide these athletes clarity above anything else. So the very first thing is that we understand the macros first, and then we strategize. So carbohydrates are going to be the most beneficial macronutrient for performance, hands down. And the timing of carbohydrates is probably one of the most underrated ways that you can increase your performance in training. I would actually argue it's one of the most overlooked ways that you can increase your performance in your training. So let's look into how we can actually do that. The first one that we want to focus on is each of the micronutrients, their function and what their importance is specifically within powerlifting. So you can see here, proteins provide amino acids for building new muscle tissue and repair from exercise. The importance of that for us is it promotes that muscle growth and recovery by supporting synthesis of new muscle tissue, particularly after intense physical activity. Fats, these are a long-term energy reserve, and I feel this is missed so often. Fats are absolutely essential for hormone production, overall metabolic health, and also obviously your endocrine systems. Again, that hormone production that is missed so often. I feel like fats get a really bad rap for absolutely no reason. They are absolutely essential that you have them in your diet. They have a very, very strong function. If you have some sort of endocrine issue, a lot of this other stuff is going to be, or the effect of all of these other things can be very much mitigated if you are having hormone issues or metabolic issues. The importance of that for us is that this supports overall health. Bear in mind, we're dealing with people and then athletes. So we're trying to make sure that these people are healthy, provides a sustained energy source and aids in the post-exercise recovery. And then on to carbohydrates. So this is the one that we're going to take a really, really big deep dive into. It is the primary fuel source for high intensity activities. It's also a really good fuel source for the brain. Its importance to us is that it replenishes muscle glycogen stores, which are depleted during the workout, and it's absolutely critical for recovery. All of this to say, why should you care? Right? We know what the function of these are. We know why it's important to us, but why should we actually care about it as powerlifting athletes? I'm not going to read all of this, thankfully. I know you've just seen a massive whack of text. But look into each of these. These are just 6 different examples of the benefits of being able to use carbs appropriately in your training, right? And surrounding those training times. So if you want to be able to pause the video and have a look at these, you absolutely can. A big thing to understand, again, nuance being heavily implied, dose differs for everyone. Okay, we're dealing with individuals. I'm going to say this quite a few times. We're dealing with individuals. Those individuals are athletes. We have to make sure that this is an individualized process. So you're going to see some relatively broad ranges, and I'm going to kind of give some examples of what those lower and higher ranges for each of these should be. So macronutrients and their dosage, protein, anywhere from 1.6 to 2.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, this entirely depends on someone's composition. Typically, those with a leaner composition can actually take a larger dose of caffeine. Usually, people with a fattier composition will have a demand for less grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. A big thing to give a consideration to is someone's lean body mass, or LBM. Dietary restrictions. Budget can actually be a really, really big one. So budget and food sourcing kind of come hand in hand. Like if we could eat, for those of us who are not vegetarians, not vegans, like if you were wanting to eat a steak every single morning, that would be fantastic. Like you'd be living some people's absolute dream life. However, that is really expensive, right? So understanding that people's dietary restrictions, budget, and preference can all have a really strong sense of interplay is really, really important whenever you're actually looking at this. Some really good sources of high quality protein can be chicken, beef, eggs are probably the absolute cheapest that you can get. Greek yogurt, soya, chickpeas, tofu. There's so many different really, really high quality sources. A natural proclivity of mine has been to lean towards whole food sources where possible. You obviously can down like 3 protein shakes in a day, and that genuinely there is a time and place, like when you're doing a fiber manipulation, that is incredibly beneficial to do. However, for the vast majority of times, you may not want to do that, right? So moving on to fats. Fats, you'll usually be dosed anywhere from 0.6, absolutely no lower, but 0.6 to 1.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. Totally depends on health. Again, this is massively surrounding someone's endocrine system, right? And being able to support their general health and well-being. You want to be able to give some consideration to the cleanliness of someone's bulk. So for example, it's very, very typical for us to just kind of whack a bunch of calories on, and that like dirty bulk mentality is so common. There are people who will want to do dirty bulks. There are people who will want to do like that cleaner bulk. In all fairness, you may actually find that some athletes would have, there's a category, in other words, which is hard gainers. Those hard gainers, you may actually want to bring back the cleanliness of that bulk. So introducing a little bit more fats, be that through fast food, be that whatever it be through, to be able to get their calories higher. Your fats are twice as energetically dense as proteins and carbohydrates. So your protein, every 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. Every 1 gram of carbohydrates is 4 calories. Every 1 gram of fats is 9 calories. So it is over twice as energetically dense. Best sources of this in general, avocado, nuts and nut butters can be fantastic. Certain types of oils, obviously not motor oil, there can be really, really good examples of, for example, extra virgin olive oil, rapeseed oil can be really, really good as well. And then seeds is another fantastic source. Your carbohydrates, so pun intended, the meat and the eggs essentially of what this is going to be, is your carbohydrates. So 2.5 to 6 plus, there's a reason that this is so open-ended. 2.5 to 6+ grams per kilogram of body weight. It totally depends on time, right? And particularly their time surrounding training. So a few things that you're going to want to give considerations to. For example, someone's fiber intake and other macronutrient intakes surrounding the time of training. This can affect how fast the carbohydrate is absorbed into the bloodstream. And so there is going to be some considerations for that whenever you're looking particularly at, as we say, optimizing this for training. Best sources of this can be rice, oats, banana is fantastic, fruit juice. Now, I've actually very deliberately put these next two down, fruit juice, and also dextrose or maltodextrin. If you haven't heard of dextrose or maltodextrin before, I really, really encourage you to look into them. Maltodextrin in particular would probably be one that I've seen so readily available to myself, to other athletes, as a fantastic, really, really fast release source of carbohydrate that is just impeccable for the sake of convenience above anything else. It is absolutely fantastic. So we understand the macros first, and then we strategize. Carbs, again, are the most macronutrient, are they? The most important macronutrient for performance. Timing carbs, again, one of the most underrated things. Timing carbs being the most underrated ways that we can increase our performance. So how do we do it? All of this depends on time. I like to use this scale. Now, slight caveat to this. I've obviously done this based off of waking up and sleep. If you have someone who is working night shift, they may be sleeping through the majority of these times. So you may actually find that it is better off looking at the proximity to training overall. So for example, instead of it being this 10 a.m. training, this could be 2 hours before training, 3-4 hours, whatever it may be. All of these differ. So where we are getting our carbohydrates in during the day very much depends on the time of training. Now, entirely anecdotal here. What I've been experimenting with myself, with my athletes, is now not requiring, but heavily encouraging a minimum of about 2 grams per kilogram of carbohydrate before training, so that they have that in before they get into train. From the typical 4 different training times, your carbohydrates are going to be a priority in the first meal if you're training before 10 a.m. If you're training after midday into around 2 p.m., your second or third meal, it depends on whether you have an actual dedicated meal, like a dedicated pre-workout meal. It entirely depends whether that falls as your second or your third. However, your second or your third meal is where you're going to get these 2 grams of carb per kilogram of body weight in. 6 p.m., it's going to be the third or fourth. And then 10th, it's actually going to be the second last meal in the day. There are going to be quite a few considerations that I'm going to get into as far as this is concerned. Now, when you have this meal will depend on what this meal is made up of. Okay. So 15 minutes before training, you're going to be looking for really, really fast digesting liquid source or simple carbohydrates. There's a big reason why I put fruit juice in here. Maltodextrin can also fall into this place as well. Squares, bars, jams, honeys, bananas. This stuff can be really, really good 15 minutes before because it is so simple, if not liquid form. So if you're having, I put down squares there and bananas. If you're having stuff that is significantly more solid form or much more complex, the carbohydrate, or if it's very complex, starch will not have the opportunity to fully break down into carbohydrate and be absorbed into your bloodstream. So it's really, really important that we keep this liquid and super, super simple if it is 15 minutes before. I want to also add a slight caveat. The fruit juice very much depends on your tolerance to that, and particularly the tolerance of your bowels towards that. There have been athletes who it's very, very easy to load up on like a liter of orange juice before going into the gym 15 minutes beforehand. That's fantastic. Your stomach is probably not going to enjoy that if it's taken within that 15 minutes. So there are some considerations to be having as far as dosage is concerned with fruit juices. Another thing to consider and again, very specific on fruit juice, you may actually find that the source of fruit juice will actually differ in the effect of how difficult that is for your bowels to deal with. So sometimes orange juice is really, really rough on people. Sometimes things like apple juice can be significantly easier, particularly if it is like a higher sugar content or more processed fruit juice or apple juice rather. That can be really, really beneficial. Complete flip side, things like prune juice, you're probably going to want to avoid, right? So it very much just depends person to person. So do be aware of that whenever you're looking at, say, if you are really, really rushed and you have a liter of orange juice, you may run into some issues as far as that's concerned. So do be aware of that. 30 minutes before, you're looking for still fast digesting, but you're going to be looking for relatively low fiber and solids. So this could be toast, bagels, fruit smoothies, rice crackers. I would even go as far to say like some like high sugar content cereals can be really good. So that would be things like Frosties is a personal favorite of mine. Loads of different things, loads of different options that you can have depending on where you're at. 60 minutes before then. So what we're looking at here is things that have a moderate glycemic index, however, still very easily digested. So you're looking oats, white rice, porridge, cereal. You can see how these carbohydrate sources start to get a little bit more complex as the proximity to training increases. Now, this does not actually mean, I'll say this kind of halfway through, this doesn't mean that you have to eat at every one of these points. It is more, say, for example, if you get out of work and you train 30 minutes later, you're probably going to be looking at toasts, bagels, fruit smoothies, that sort of thing. If you get out of work and 3 or 4 hours later you train, that should drastically change what you're doing. 120 minutes before, now, you can have mixed glycemic index food sources here, some fiber, and keep things very, very light on fat and protein. Fats and proteins, protein in particular, is a significantly larger molecule, and so takes longer to be able to be digested. Whenever that is mixed in a meal, that will slow down the digestion time overall of the entire meal, including the carbohydrate source that you've just had. So if you're having, for example, in 60 minutes before, we have just white rice. In 120 minutes before, you might be looking at a small amount of chicken with that rice, just to give that an opportunity to be absorbed into the bloodstream at the correct time. Bagels and peanut butter can be another really good one. Again, you're having that carbohydrate representation and then some fat representation as well. And then pastas with light sauces is another fantastic one. Pasta's a favorite for so many people. The reason I have a star here is because this is one of 2 different very, very specific timings by federation. So remember, whenever you weigh in IPF or USAPL, you're going to be having about 120 minutes before you hit that platform. So bear in mind, 120 minutes can be really, really good. Sometimes even the 60-minute category foods can be marginally better. The only reason I say that is because 120 minutes, you may be 120 minutes out from platform if you have a 2-hour weigh-in. However, you're probably about 60 minutes out from beginning your warm-ups or in and around there. So you may find that those 60 minutes before foods are actually more applicable for you when it comes to competition than the 120-minute foods. So just be aware of that stipulation. And then anything more than 120 minutes, you're looking really, really slow carbs, moderate fiber, moderate protein. So brown rice, quinoa, whole grain pastas, whole grain breads, or sweet potatoes as well can be awesome. So moving over to supplements, I'm only going to cover 3 here. There's quite a lot of different things that you can do with this. However, your caffeine, 45 to 60 minutes before training, you should have anywhere from 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight. So for myself, if I was on the high end of that as a 74 kilo lifter and taking 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, that would be around 450 milligrams of caffeine. That is, in my personal opinion, top end. Now, what I will actually say, there have been a few research articles to suggest that anywhere up to 9 milligrams per kilogram of body weight can be beneficial. The massive stipulation here is tolerance, right? So if you are gradually increasing your caffeine tolerance, you may end up finding that you are taking 2 scoops of your pre-workout, 2.5, 3, whatever it may be, or you're having more net caffeine per day. Caffeine cycling can be a really, really useful tool for those who find that they're into those upper limits of like that 6 milligrams, or perhaps not feeling the effects of their pre-workout the same way that they were before. You may find that taking your week one essentially of the block and reducing that down to maybe 1.5 or even as low as 1 milligram per kilo body weight in caffeine can be very, very beneficial if you take that for that 1 to maybe 2 weeks as essentially a tolerance reset, so that whenever you come back into those heavier stimulus training weeks, you can come back and return to that 3 milligrams per kilo and then move up from that point. Your electrolytes then. So this is anywhere from 0 minutes before training until about 2 hours beforehand. The primary one that we're going to be looking at is sodium. Now, electrolytes actually do include significantly more than sodium. However, sodium is probably the one which is most beneficial to us. You're going to be looking for around 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium added to your fluids anywhere from walking into training to about 2 hours beforehand. My personal preference is that you have this essentially happen over a continuum. So if you have, say, a liter of water, you put about 1,000 milligrams of sodium into that. Diorolite can be a fantastic source of that. So they are essentially little sachets. They have about 500 milligrams in them. Those actually readily mix on the packet with 200 mils of water. My preferred suggestion would be that you have a larger volume of water if you're having it further out. Now, diorolite is a particularly good example for those who have 2 hour weigh-ins. If you do find that you have the availability to eat and drink before you weigh in, which can be common, especially with those who are having really, really heavy cuts, or those who aren't quite filled out in the weight class yet, just 200 mils of water will entirely dissolve 1 packet of diorolite, which gives you about 500 milligrams of sodium, which is really, really beneficial to your performance. And then creatine, it literally does not matter when you take it, as long as you take it every day. 3 to 5 grams daily is going to be the kind of go-to as far as what the research suggests. However, there is an awful lot of research going on right now to suggest that anywhere from like 10 to, from what I've heard, as high as 25 grams can be beneficial, not just for athletes, but for larger populaces. So that's particularly starting to look into the cognitive benefits of creatine monohydrate. So it's really, really interesting to look into that. For the majority of us athletes, however, anywhere from 3 to 5 grams daily is going to suffice. So when we come to meet day, a really important thing is understanding when your weigh-in happens and then a plan surrounding that. Proximity is king, essentially. If we can very much optimize things for proximity, we're going to be at a significantly larger advantage rather than just kind of thinking, yeah, I'll get it in whenever. So if you have a 2 hour weigh-in, so this will be IPF federations, USAPL federations, immediately after, I would suggest anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of electrolytes. I know that sounds like a lot. Anywhere from 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram of fast release carbohydrates. So again, you may be 2 hours out from the platform. You are probably anywhere from 60 to 75 minutes out from warming up. You want to be able to have all of this in, digested, and starting to get into your bloodstream by that time. You do not want to sit in your opening squat feeling really, really bloated, feeling perhaps even nauseous because of how much you've consumed. It is the most, like, speaking from experience, it is the most off-putting thing in the world. Then when you are actually 60 minutes out from the platform, so this realistically is probably going to be roughly when you're starting your warm-ups, have anywhere from an additional approximately half of a gram per kilogram of body weight. So again, for me, 74 kilos, it's going to be anywhere in and around that 35, 38 kilo mark of simple carbohydrates. From that point, I'll be sipping on electrolytes and I'll have my first caffeine dose. So that is not the 450 milligrams. Very typically, what I will do is separate out that caffeine by the event. So while I'm warming up, I will have about 150. Say, for example, if I'm having That's 6 milligrams per kilo of body weight. That for me is going to be in and around that 450 mark. At my first caffeine dose will be 150. That'll be during my squat warm up. My second dose will be another 150 during bench warm up. My third dose will be about another 150, sometimes 200. We know how deadlifts go. While I'm warming up for deads. Outside of that, federations which have a 24-hour weigh-in, so this will be like WRPF, WPC, APF. Immediately after that weigh-in, get water in you. The something that's actually really interestingly strategic with the 24-hour weigh-in federations is that you can come into it off of a significantly more aggressive cut. And as a result of that, you have longer, as a result of the 24-hour weigh-in, you have longer to be able to replenish and mitigate the physiological impact of a heavy cut, right? So people who do the 2-hour weigh-in in the IPF or USAPL, if you were to do a water cut in that federation, the physiological impact would be really, really high. Like we do see every now and again people do these huge water cuts and they are just as apt by the time they get onto the platform, right? Or people who have taken like multiple different attempts at weighing in because they need to sweat, they need to spit, whatever they need to do. The harsher that cut is for them, the greater the physiological impact and the greater the impact upon performance. For 24-hour weigh-in federations, you may actually want to consider, particularly if it's coming down to like perhaps a body weight win, whatever it may be, if you know roughly where your competition lays, you may actually want to consider a marginally heavier cut from more physiological impact because you have a full 24 hours to be able to replenish your glycogen stores, replenish your water, replenish your electrolytes, right? So really important consideration, coach's end, as far as these, like depending on which federation you're from. As far as carbohydrates go for those who are in 24-hour weigh-ins, anywhere from 1 gram to 1.5 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight per hour. So that for me, let's make math simple, it'll be about 75 grams of carbs per hour for 2 to 3 hours after that weigh-in, right? So that's going to total me about 225 grams of carbs, and even up towards 250, 270. That is so important. Again, you want to really make sure that you are replenishing those glycogen stores, get you up, get your back on your feet. You don't have to make weight again, right? So really make use of this. You can be very aggressive with this the day before. The remainder of the day, you're going to want to eat every 2 to 3 hours until you reach anywhere from 8 to 10 grams per kilogram of carb. That sounds crazy, I know. The ability to be able to front load this is absolutely crazy. And the very much an anecdotal thing with this. So we ran this with Eldon, Milo, and Lanny the times that they competed. So they are all over in Utah. They compete APF, which is like America's local WPC federation. We were so aggressive with our play on that. And got to, I think we got Eldon to nearly 11 grams per kilo. And he felt phenomenal coming in on the day. Didn't feel zapped whatsoever. Got a really good night's sleep. It was absolutely fantastic for him. Whenever you come into day of the competition, you're going to look to 1 or 2 grams per kilogram of carb, and a little bit of protein. Again, based off of this previous example, where we used protein to be able to deliberately slow the digestion of carbohydrate so that it gets into the bloodstream and actually starts affecting us at the appropriate time, right? Very much depends on what time of day you're competing, but very typically that morning of fuel can be really important. Something I do want to go into is that there is a silent decider in all of this. Something which so often is overlooked by so many people. And all of this doesn't really matter unless you are doing this one thing. And that is ensuring that you're getting good quality sleep. I know this is about nutrition. There is literally no amount of quality within your nutrition that is going to fix poor sleep. None of it. It is so pivotal, so beneficial for so many different reasons. I've put up just three here, three primary ones. The one that I have probably seen have the most effect on athletes in competition and in training is going to be the decision-making process as far as attempt selection is concerned. Now, again, in competition is one thing, in training is another. Like I have seen athletes come into the gym on less sleep and make really, well, let's say worse decisions than what they would typically make had they had a good night's sleep. Right? It's so interesting. The rate of motor learning, so an athlete's ability to essentially learn the process, your cognitive function significantly deteriorates whenever you have a lack of sleep. Sleep hygiene might be one of the most important and, again, often really overlooked ways to be able to improve your sleep. There is quantity and there is quality. Again, this is no diet is going to fix per sleep or even per sleep hygiene. So if you're getting up and going to bed at the same times, even on those rest days, if you're getting the same amount of sleep, that's going to really help you out. Caffeine cut off. So I actually have an alarm on my phone, and this is like a practical example of how this sort of stuff applies. I have an alarm on my phone that is a caffeine ban, and I cannot want the moment that alarm sounds, I will not be allowed to consume any more caffeine. That might be a little bit crazy. There's sometimes, it's later in the day, you maybe have assignments, you have things that you're studying for, you have work that needs to be done, you have deadlines that you need to meet. You think, okay, fine, I'm just going to pull an all-nighter. You absolutely have to take caffeine, sure, but you will deteriorate really significantly your sleep hygiene. And I'd actually argue this, see, for people who are studying for exams in particular, the detriment to your cognitive function that a bad night's sleep is going to have will probably outweigh the additional time that you gained in studying that material. There is a really strong parallel between that and training. Like, you may come into training thinking that you are capable for something that you may not be, simply because of a lapse of judgment due to a poor night's sleep. I've seen this way too many times. I've seen this so many times. Another really good way to keep your sleep clean, cool, dark, and quiet rooms. I'm not going to do that conversion for our American folks, I'm sorry, but 18 to 20 degrees Celsius seems to be in and around the best place. And then reduce screen times or entirely mitigate them about an hour before you intend to sleep. This one in particular, now I don't want to rant too much about sleep here, but the amount of people that I know that will sit on their phone until I don't even know what time and expect to be able to come in and have good performance astounds me, really. It is such a simple thing to implement, but as I say, those alarms, so again, a caffeine ban, a screen ban is another one. Like, if you have an alarm that goes off on your phone and it is close the laptop, turn off the TV, dim the lights, get off your phone, like, reduce the amount of blue light that you are getting, your sleep quality will be so much better as a result. You may not actually notice your sleep quality consciously being better. So you may still be sleeping 8 or 9 hours a night. However, how you have slept and how many sleep cycles you have had, or the quality of that sleep, can drastically change. That actually compounds over time. So you will get increased returns up to a certain point whenever you clean up your sleep. 7 hours of sleep, in my personal opinion, is definitely a hot take, but in my personal opinion, and from what the research seems to be showing, for strength athletes, 7 hours is bare minimum. 8 to 9 is ideal. If you are in like a really heavy training phase, you may even want to consider 10, because of the effects that it has on reversing neurological fatigue. If you are really heavy training all the time, let's just throw out a total hypothetical, you're running 8.5s statically for weeks, you're going to want 10 hours of sleep a night. You're not going to want to come in and look to do an 8.5 every single time on 4 hours sleep, 3 hours sleep, right? It's going to be really rough. Think of it this way. You wouldn't get into bed covered in dirt. So keep your sleep clean. Huge overarching principle is this. The title athlete is a way of life. This is not just a title that we give to our athletes. There's actually a reason why, in my opinion, anyone who is a member of Dedicated by Design is very, very seldom referred to as a client. They are referred to as athletes because that is how they are treated. To be an athlete is a way of life. It is entirely different than just having a title. It's not just doing a sport either, in my personal opinion, kind of a hot take. Being an athlete is not just doing a sport. Being an athlete is acting in accordance with what the highest level of that sport demands of you. There are so many people within powerlifting who you can very easily get ahead of. So some of the competition that you're looking at, you can probably get an edge ahead of those people by simply sleeping better, eating better, controlling your stress more. Like the amount of control that you do genuinely have over your externals, over certainly your behaviors, is what makes you an athlete. That is paramount. All of this diet and nutritional advice, being able to use and leverage carbohydrates, being able to clean up your sleep, these principles and this knowledge is fantastic. Like the information being out there is absolutely amazing. However, wisdom is knowledge correctly applied. You are not wise if you know this stuff and don't apply it. Alex Hormozy talks about the difference between intelligence and learning something, and I want to speak to this. To learn something implies to change your behavior. So same conditions, different behavior. With this information, if you have actually learned something from this, your behavior will change as a result. Otherwise, you have learned nothing. The way that Alex Hormozy would put it is that you're essentially here for entertainment as opposed to betterment, right? It is actually really entertaining to look at all these different things with it. If you're inclined that way, it can be very, very interesting. But if it doesn't change your behavior, it is quite simply entertainment. So that is the learning side of things. Intelligence is rate. So how fast you change your behavior or how fast you learn something is what dictates your intelligence. To be the best athlete you can be, you must learn firstly, but you learn fast, and that makes you not only an athlete, but an intelligent athlete. Everyone at the top of any human endeavor works hard. Everyone at the top of any human endeavor works hard, right? You have to in order to get there. It is literally the prerequisite. You, however, cannot expect to work smart, not hard at the top. Everyone is working hard and everyone is working smart, right? If you want half a chance of being able to get there, if your goal is getting up into those 400 dots, 450, 500 dots, if it is adding the next, like getting into that next 100 kilo of your total, you're gonna have to work hard 100%, but you're gonna have to work smart as well. And this is the best information, in my opinion, some of the lowest hanging fruit that you can actually apply actively within your life, literally today. Like the moment you've seen this, you can go ahead and apply this tomorrow. It's so imperative that you understand that. There are so many people who have these really, really big goals, and the reason that they will likely never achieve those goals is because they do not subscribe to process and they do not subscribe to systems. These are processes and systems that are going to better equip you to increase the likelihood that you achieve those goals, right? So we want to make sure that you're working hard 100%, but if we can have you work smart and hard, you're going to see exponential returns on your work. I forget what slide it is. I do want to go back to it though. Whenever we were talking about this, I essentially gave out a loom to all of my athletes and explained I'd love all of us to try this of having this minimum of 2 grams of carbohydrate per kilo of body weight. The other stipulation I had was that had to happen within 2 hours of before your training. So many people looked at that and they're like, "What on earth? How are we going to do that?" Like it genuinely, there's so many people that were so um kind of astonished that this was even a suggestion. And so many people thought that's not like feasible. That's not on. It's from this anecdote that we've been able to see these huge returns on people's performance, like absolutely huge returns on people's performance. Coombe has had the personal anecdote of working together with Milo. Since Milo has been leveraging this, his recoverability has been better. Like Milo is currently experiencing pain. His recoverability is significantly better. Kaylani was experiencing pain. She has been pain-free for weeks now since we implemented this. Sophie just doubled the Northern Irish squat record, all because we've started implementing this. Like there are so I can't hammer this point home enough. If you really get aggressive with your carbohydrate consumption, particularly before training, so 2 grams of carbs per kilo, 2 hours before your training, right? Irrespective of what time you train, it is unbelievable what will happen to you. My own personal anecdote is that one of the first time that I tried this, and I think it was really kind of accidental that I had done this. It was a convenience thing for me to eat like Frosties, for example, and I just thought I'll just have a massive bowl of it here. When I was logging it, I ended up getting like 150, 160 grams of carbohydrate. It's a big bowl. And I came into squats and I could barely put my knee sleeves on because my legs felt so puffy and my squat session went awesome. It was fantastic. And it was ever since then, I was like, there's no way that carbohydrate has not had that effect. Like, there's no way that there's no link between those. That has to have an effect. Um, I would really, really strongly encourage every one of you to start considering leveraging some of this stuff within your athletes. Again, it is some of the lowest hanging fruit stuff that you are probably ever going to find as far as nutrition. It's so easy to be able to implement in your own training and your athletes training, whatever it may be. So please consider doing this. You can apply this today, right? Let's make sure that we are learning by changing our behavior, but let's also be intelligent by doing it quickly. If you've enjoyed this, please hit subscribe down below, comment what you are going to try within these next couple days, and let us know how it goes for you. We'll see you later.